Let's begin.
Hey there, scary story fanatics! Welcome back to Cleaving Thought from Bone with your host, Sociopathic. Ready to get back out there and clean up the streets? Well, break a leg, and an arm, and a finger, and whatever else you might have. This one might put you in traction. Not All Heroes Wear Capes, Volume 4, Broken Bones.
I was still marked as a murderer, but at least I didn't have any diseases from all the blood that came my way. I would have to check back in again from time to time because of my line of work. It's better to be safe than sorry. Another good thing was, now I knew a little bit more about the guy behind all the crime. And maybe, if I found him, maybe he could tell me more about why this happened to me. Maybe he knew something about all this. He figured if he was driving all these people to do all these terrible things, he had to know something. Whoever this handyman was, I figured that he had to be pretty powerful. If he could force people with these dark abilities to do whatever he wanted of them, he had to be something beyond anyone I had went against so far. But first, I had other things to deal with. I needed to clear my name with my family, but I also knew that my wife didn't want to see me, or for me to be around our daughter. It wasn't safe. But I had to let them know that I was okay, and that I wasn't to blame for the recent murders. So, I went to where they were staying, at her parents' house, and I left them a note in the mailbox. I wrote it in such a way that my wife would know what I was talking about, but anyone else that may have read it would just see a letter from a loving husband. A kind of code that I knew she would understand, and I left it at that. I kept my distance, but kept myself as involved as I could be. I was on my way home from delivering this message when I met someone. Someone that wasn't too fond of me. "You fucking killed her!" a man's voice said from the shadows off to my right. "What? Who's there?" I yelled into the darkness, but I got no reply. Instead, I heard a crunching sound, followed by the now familiar sound of tearing flesh. Then, out of the shadows, came a long, sharp, blood-covered object. It flew past my head, just missing me by inches before it was lodged into the side of the building beside me. It appeared to be a long bone of some kind that was thrown with such a force that it stuck into the brick wall of the building. Not to mention that bone should break before brick does. Then, he stepped out of the shadows and into the illumination of the street light. He was a short, thin guy, spindly and skeletal in his narrow frame. He was completely bald, and his eyes kind of bugged out of his wide head a bit. He was weird looking, but what was most off-putting about him was his hand was dangling off loose flesh of a broken arm, an arm where a bone had been broken and pulled from. "What the fuck?" I said aloud, completely flabbergasted at how a guy could rip out his own bones and throw them at me. But then, I was even more shocked as I watched through the torn opening in his flesh as his bone reformed like bugs massing together to create new marrow and bone around it, before connecting to his flesh and pulling the torn bits back into it so that his ripped skin could fuse itself back together, leaving a pale white scar where the tear once was. Just one scar of dozens, large and small, scattered across his entire body, topping off with one that spanned across both cheeks, connecting at the corners of his mouth and wrapping nearly around his bald head from ear to ear. "You killed her! You killed my Catherine!" The man spoke with a tone that sounded like it came more from a man's nose than from his mouth, a sniveling tone not too dissimilar from that of the stereotypical Igor character in old cartoons of haunted houses and Frankenstein tales. "I had to. She would have killed me if I didn't," I answered the awkward man. "I don't care about you. I loved her, not you," the odd man said, pointing one of his long fingers at me. Then from beneath the man's fingernail came a long bone spike that started out thin before expanding and shooting out of his torn, open finger in my direction. Luckily for me, I saw it coming and was able to sidestep the projectile. But this projectile was followed up with the short man charging at me, nearly foot-long claws of bone curling outward from bloody wounds at each fingertip on both hands, slashing at me violently in a mad rage. I couldn't do anything but step back and dodge away from his strikes. One of his bone claws made connection with my arm, tearing the sleeve of my coat to ribbons, and the next strike would have surely done me in, had it not been for what happened next. The shadows behind the man began to bend and twist out of shape, forming into a two-dimensional shape that did not match the shadow cast by any other thing on the street. The shadow then tackled the man to the ground and enveloped him. I watched as the two-dimensional darkness became a three-dimensional shape and found a woman within the twisting shadows, pinning the man to the ground beneath her. But not for long. Several bones burst from the man's back as his ribs reversed themselves and shot backwards like spider legs coming out of the man's back, allowing him to swiftly push himself upward, knocking the woman off of him and allowing him to make an escape. He didn't expect to be attacked by a living shadow, and, quite frankly, neither did I. I was then able to get a better look at this woman. She was young, probably in her 20s, and I could tell that she either took this new power of hers either way too seriously or not seriously enough, because this girl had made herself a full-blown outfit. She had her hair tied back and wore a small black mask over her eyes, while her mouth was covered by a violet-colored scarf that draped over her shoulders, around her neck, and the rest of her body was covered by a skin-tight black suit with various pockets and pouches scattered about, most of them black, but others were the same color as her scarf. Her suit was completely color-coordinated. "Hello there, citizen," the girl said in her best superheroine voice. "No need to thank... Wait a second." The girl broke character after realizing who I was. You're him! Oh my God, you're him! You're the God's Hand!" she said with glee. Yeah, I replied to her, not knowing what to make of her. "I can't believe it," she said. "You inspired me to start fighting crime. You stood up against those bad guys in the city. Without you, so many people would have lost so much. You're a hero," she said, idolizing me. "Sorry to burst your bubble, but I'm no hero," I told her. "You're just being modest. Because of you, several people were able to return to their families unharmed," she kindly argued. Because of me, a lot of other people were never able to make it home to their families. Because I made them kill themselves. That's what I do when I touch people. They brutally end their own lives. That's not a hero, I rebutted, showing the girl my black and decayed-looking hand. The girl just kind of looked away from me, toward the ground and off to the side. I was a far cry from the hero she had imagined me to be. That's the thing about idols. They rarely live up to the figures built into one's imagination. So, who was that guy? I asked her, noticing her discomfort. I call him Bonesaw, and I've been chasing after him for a couple of months now, the girl said, perking up a bit. Bonesaw? Why Bonesaw? I asked her. Well, he can control his bones, as you just saw. And when I first fought him, he turned his arm into a chainsaw and came at me like a lumberjack on crack. The woman answered. Oh, well, fair enough. I nodded and shrugged in comical agreement. And what about you? What's your name? I asked her. You can call me Eidolon, the young woman answered. Eidolon? That's an interesting name, I said. It has a few definitions. It could mean an idolized person, one who represents and stands up for their ideals. Or the ancient Greeks, a ghost, a phantom, like a shadow in the night. It's pretty fitting, don't you think? The girl said, her cheeks curling upward behind her scarf, obviously smiling. Yeah, I gotta admit, that's pretty cool, I replied from behind my bloody cross bandana, suddenly feeling a bit underdressed, considering that my crime-fighting outfit consisted of ragged old clothes, a pair of gloves, and a bloodied white bandana. After a while of chit-chatting in the shadows, Eidolon asked a question that I was expecting, but I wasn't too sure about. So, since we both have a common enemy, maybe we could pool our resources and get this guy off the streets. Stop his trail of death before it gets any worse, Eidolon suggested. I don't know, I said, feeling uncomfortable with the idea. I shut myself off from my family to keep them safe. I didn't want to put anyone else in danger, but she was already in danger with or without me. And 2 is better than 1. It can cover more ground. But then again, she would probably freak out when she actually saw my ability in action. Witnessing a thing like that kind of changes a person, and it's a heavy price to pay. All those thoughts fell through my mind, each of them hitting hard in a fast, passing moment. Come on, we can stop him before he kills anyone else, she spoke up. How many has he killed? I asked. At least 12 that I know of, the woman replied. Pretty much all the people you went against were just interested in stealing from people, but not this guy. This guy has a different role in all of this. Whatever this is, she added, pausing for a moment before continuing. Bonesaw. He killed people before he got his powers. He did time in prison for manslaughter. Killed my cousin Joey. It was a murder and he got away with a slap on the wrist. And then, he just kept on killing. And now, he has a built-in murder weapon at all times. What kind of sick twist of fate would give a guy like that a weapon like that? She finished, sniffling back the tears. I'm sorry, I told her, not knowing what else to say. But I think something's different now. His targets have changed. He used to target teenagers, but then a couple of weeks ago, he started killing businessmen and people with shady connections. I think he might be a hitman for hire now, she said. Ever hear of the handyman? I asked her. No, why? She replied. I think he might be our guy, the one who hired him, I answered. Who is he? I don't know. I just found out about him myself, I answered. Does this mean we can team up? At least for a little while? Eidolon asked sweetly. Yeah, I guess. I relented. Yes, the woman said, pulling her fist back in a victorious fashion. The hand and the shadow. I can already hear the shadow puppet comments, I joked, causing her to let out a little giggle from behind the scarf. I gotta get home. I'll see you tomorrow. Say 10ish, right here? The woman suggested. Deal. We can talk more about what each of us knows, and maybe, together, we can formulate some kind of plan of action, I replied. All right, see you then, the woman said, before dropping backwards into the shadow caused by a street sign, and completely vanishing into the thin veil of darkness. Well, that was unexpected, I said to myself with a shrug, before making my trip home. The next night, Eidolon and I met up like we planned. Both of us were a bit early. We talked for a while and learned some new things. For instance, while I was out stopping petty thugs and bank robbers with superpowers, she was out fighting some of the darker aspects of the city, murderers and kidnappers. She was the real hero here. I was just another murderer. I wouldn't be any different from those she hunted, had it not been for circumstances and my morality. Together, though, we were actually able to figure out something extremely important. After looking at all those we've faced, every single one of those affected, the altered, as she called them, all the ones with abilities, the ones we knew of anyway, they all lived within a 5-mile radius, and we were damn sure that somewhere in the center of that circle we would find what we were looking for, the start of all this and the reason for it. So, that is where we set off to go. The course of action led us to a fairly seedy side of the city. Don't get me wrong, it wasn't like a cars up on cinder blocks, missing their tires kind of neighborhood. Not entirely, anyway. It was a market and business area. Everything from a local fruit salesman at the start of the street to big corporations scattered further down the road. Hundreds of people, all peddling their wares through the night. Shit, how are we going to find anything in all this? Eidolon asked. We have to get in closer and see if we can find anything, I guess. I answered, looking away from her and pulling up my hood, far over my head to conceal my face before tucking my bloody bandana into my shirt. Gotcha, she said happily. See you down there, Eidolon added before sidestepping into the darkness and vanishing into nothing. The streets were full of hustle and bustle, and everyone was going about their night, buying whatever their hearts desired. Salesmen pitched their wares, and the smell of spices and perfumes filled the air. To the average person, this place was a wonderland of discounts, but I could tell that it was something entirely different. This place was ripe with theft and lies. Something was always just a bit off, no matter where you looked. Thugs in the shadows, lurking beyond desperate merchants. My suspicions were verified when I noticed a salesman being nervously led into the darkness behind a curtain in his own home. I couldn't let an innocent man get shaken down by these chumps, and if they were extorting local merchants, they probably worked for someone. I quietly made my way behind the table of various trinkets, looking around to make sure that no one witnessed my entry, and slipped behind the curtain into the man's home. I pulled my bloody mask from beneath my shirt and wrapped it around my face before turning to find a woman and her daughter huddled in the corner, the woman hugging her child closely, both of them sitting silently in tears. I quickly put up my finger to my lips and shushed them before whispering soft assurances to them that everything would be all right before I turned to the closed door where I could hear angered, speech. I took in a deep breath, removed my glove, and pushed the door open. Inside, I found 3 guys around a bloodied and bruised man in a chair. A swing came from the large man to my right, but I grabbed his bare hand, which caused him to continue his swing around into the wall, where he then turned his body and began smashing his own face into the wall's wooden beam. Another man attempted to retrieve a gun, but luckily for me, I was able to do the same to him, passing my cursed hand over his, thus causing him to turn the gun on himself and pull the trigger, splattering his brains all over his friend's terrified face. The third man behind his victim in the chair then pulled a knife and attempted to make a hostage out of the poor merchant. "Don't come any closer, asshole, or I'll slice the shithead's throat," yelled the very much freaked out balding man. "You do that, and I'll make sure you get the worst of it," I replied to him, referring to how I disposed of his friends. "You're gonna let me out of here, you understand me? I'll do it, man. Don't think I won't do it," he spoke nervously. "I'll let you go, but first, you're gonna tell me who you're working for," I demanded. "No way, man. I ain't telling you shit," the man said, pressing the knife into the poor man's neck a bit. Last chance. Let the man go and tell me what I want to know. I repeated my offer. "Fuck you," the man said, before thrusting the knife at the man's neck, but he was quickly stopped by a solidified shadow shooting out from the corner of the room and pushing him violently against the wall, pinning him there and allowing the poor merchant to flee to his family in the other room. "You're gonna tell my friend here what he wants to know, or you're gonna end up like your buddies down there, understand?" said Eidolon, as she stepped out from the shadows of where her giant, solid shadow hand had come. Okay, please, don't hurt me, please," the man said, pleading for his life, just like every other tough guy that I'd come across previously, big and bad, until their life was in my hands. Then they just fell apart and cried like babies. "Who is your boss? Who is the handyman?" I yelled at him. I don't know his name. I just do what I'm told by the other guys. But I know where he is. He owns a big building at the end of the block. In layman's terms. It's written on the side, all fancy-like. He runs everything around here. Please don't tell him I told you anything. Please let me go. Please. I won't do anything like this again. I promise. Please." The man answered me, blubbering like a whining fool. "Thank you for the information. Now, go home, get some sleep, wake up tomorrow morning, have some breakfast, and thank whatever God you believe in for another day. If we hear about you again, we will be back. And I mean that. If you so much as jaywalk, I will put an end to you. Got it?" I demanded of him. Yes, sir. I promise. Never again, sir. Thank you, sir." "And make sure to apologize to that nice family on your way out," Eidolon added. "Yes, ma'am," he said, before running out the door, and we could hear him issuing a full apology before he booked it out onto the streets, hopefully a changed man. Thank you so much," I heard from both the man and the woman of the house on our way out. "We're gonna make sure you don't have to go through this ever again," Eidolon promised them, bringing a smile to their faces. We were about to walk out the door when a little girl came up and hugged my side before holding her hand out to me. I held open my palm beneath her hand, and she dropped something from her hand into mine. It was a little metal pin. A pin of a hand giving a peace sign. "Thanks. I collect pins and I want you to have this one." The little girl smiled at me, bringing a sigh of happiness from her mother and also one from me. "Thank you. I'll keep it close to my heart," I told her before pinning it on my chest. Eidolon and I left the family, and lucky for them, her powers were good for more than just bringing herd into places. They could also remove people from them as well. So, the cleanup was minimal. In layman's terms, a business that had more than one meaning. It was a company that sold both various insurances and security services to local homes and businesses. They prided themselves on helping people understand how everything worked in their industry. Their motto was, learning, understanding, helping, for the expert to the layman. We quickly put the pieces together of whoever was in charge of this place was creating the problem by robbing various banks around the city and then offering a solution to return their money to them at a high price for future service to make their location more safe and secure. They were creating crime to monopolize on their industry. Whoever was in charge was hurting people in order to help them. After conversing in the darkness of an alley beyond the prying eyes of passers-by, we made our way to the building where the man had directed us. The place was huge, probably about a dozen floors high, and looked pretty extravagant. What appeared to be marble stairs led up to the stone landing in front of a large glass revolving door. The words, in layman's terms, were written in a beautiful calligraphy lettering on the side of the building, letters that were raised off the building's face and accentuated by LED lights behind them. We watched a rather large man in a cream-colored suit climb into a black SUV out front of the building, which was then escorted by several others of the same color and style. A caravan of vehicles that all appeared completely the same. Someone of importance. That was probably our guy. Hey, Eidolon, keep an eye on that guy, I said, having a hunch that he was important. On it, she said, vanishing into the darkness of the night. I'm going to see what I can find out here, I said, before making my way up the stairs and into the lobby of the building, which was surprisingly still open. Hello, can I help you? A nice woman behind a very gorgeous azure-colored desk asked me. Yeah, I said, taking my hood down, my mask now tucked behind my shirt once again. Can you tell me more about the owner of this building, please? I asked. May I ask why? The woman asked. I searched for a believable lie, and I'm a blogger. I'm writing a blog about the influence of local businesses, and what could be more influential than your company. So I wanted to learn more, was the excuse that came out of my mouth. Luckily for me, the woman believed it. Oh, well, in that case, I'd be happy to answer any questions you might have. The kind woman began. In layman's terms, was founded 15 years ago by Layman Brown, and, with a clever play on words, that's how we got our name. His business started small, and for a long time he struggled, but he kept at it, and things slowly grew and grew. And then, just as of a few years ago, things started booming for him, and this building sprung up, and here we are. Anything else you'd like to know? The woman explained, happy to tell me more. Would I be able to schedule a meeting with Mr. Brown? I asked the woman. Oh, please, call him Layman. He doesn't like any formalities. He's really very nice, but I'm afraid he's very busy, and I don't think I could schedule you in. But I'd be happy to tell you anything else you might want to know, the woman said. She was very helpful, but she was completely oblivious to the inner workings of what went on in her company, and everything here was probably on the up and up, and I wouldn't be able to find much else. No, thank you, ma'am. That's all right. You've told me enough to work with. Thank you very much for your time, I said, with a smile before I turned and walked out of the building. I figured Eidolon would be the best bet for getting into this place, because I knew I probably wouldn't be very successful at getting past the tight security here. Not without killing innocent people, that is, and that wasn't something I wanted to do. I didn't make it 2 blocks before I felt a sharp pain in my side. I looked down to find a jagged, bloody yet white-colored object sticking out of my side. It had penetrated into the side of my chest a short distance before it stopped at my rib cage. A broken bone flung from the darkness and into my flesh. "You killed her! You murdered my Catherine!" the sniveling man said as he stepped out of the shadows, his bald head cocked to the side a bit, looking at me with an awkward rage. "She attacked me. I didn't have a choice, and you keep calling her your Catherine. I doubt she wanted to have anything to do with you," I said to him, pulling the bone from my side and clutching the wound, applying pressure. "I admired her so much. So much. We didn't ever talk much, but I knew she loved me. I knew she wanted me too, but her father would never allow it. But you took care of him too. You killed them both," the man said, changing his tone to one that sounded as if his mind was distant. "Yeah? You're a creeper, just like I thought," I told him, a bit weirded out by exactly how creepy this guy was. "You don't understand true love," the creepy man called Bonesaw spoke before snapping his arm at the wrist and shooting out another bone shard at me. I jumped out of the way and removed my glove, but my decayed and cursed hand was quickly pinned to the wall beside me by another small bone fragment that had forced its way through the palm of my hand and on through the back, sticking my cursed hand to the wall and causing me to let out a scream in pain. "Not yet, my friend, not yet," Bonesaw said. "Not until I make you feel how I feel," he added, before jumping into the darkness where I heard bones crunching and cracking, followed by a woman's screams. I struggled with the bone in my hand, trying to pull it from the wall, but it was little use. It was stuck there pretty well. Then the freak emerged from the darkness again, but this time he looked like something out of a nightmare. His ribcage had grown in size, and his ribs now stuck out from his chest like the legs of a giant spider. A giant spider whose legs curled around the body of a screaming woman, covered in the man's blood as his bones pierced into her flesh. And it was then that I noticed who the woman was. "My God, Jennifer!" I yelled to my terrified wife, trapped within the confines of the monster's arachnid ribcage. "Please!" she cried, screaming and pleading my name. "Let her go!" I yelled to Bonesaw, pleadingly. "Not until you feel how I feel," he spoke again, before several more bones shot out of the back of his hand, before curling around to pierce their sharp ends into the stone of the buildings around him. 6 more spider-like legs made of bone, sprouting from his back to lift him off the ground, before his face split open at the middle like giant, salivating mandibles. Rows of teeth forming into fangs, his neck grew in size, and his skin split at the shoulders, his vertebrae extending, thus allowing his neck to curl down inward into his own chest. "No!" I screamed as I ripped my hand from the wall, the bone passing completely through my hand as I left it behind, stuck in the wall. I ran to my wife's aid, but it was too late. I watched the monster's powerful mandibles crunch down onto her face, ripping it from her body. I screamed with pain unimaginable, making a sound that I could not possibly recreate if I attempted to do so. A guttural throe of pain from the pits of my stomach. I still ran toward the beast, jumping into the air and grabbing onto what flesh I could, causing the creature to drop my wife's body to the ground as the bones within the man's body began to break themselves, crunching inward upon him 100-fold, breaking so much that they began to turn to dust before my eyes, unable to reform. His flesh fell from his body. His healing ability was also stripped from him. His bones pierced back into his flesh, and his entire form began to rip itself apart, his bones breaking away to nothing, and his flesh being torn from the remaining bit of his torso and appendages, until it was nothing more than a mass of unrecognizable flesh and broken bones upon the ground, parts of it still hanging off the stone walls where the bones had dug their way in. I ran to my wife's body, which lay lifeless on the ground, and I kneeled beside her, holding her close to me, her blood covering my clothing, staining my hoodie red. I sat there for a moment, completely in shock, before I snapped back to reality. My little girl could also be in danger. I didn't know what to do. Millions of thoughts raced through my mind. Where was my daughter? Was she safe? Were they hurting her? Maybe she was with her grandparents. How would I tell them about their daughter? How would I tell my daughter about her mom? All these thoughts and more raced through my mind as I ran as quickly as I could down the road in the direction of the main road, where I could maybe flag down a taxi or something to get me to my in-laws' house and see if my daughter was all right. I didn't find a taxi. Instead, I saw the caravan of SUVs returning from wherever they had gone to. But I didn't have time for that. I had to make sure my little girl was safe. "Hey, you look pretty beat up, man." Eidolon's familiar voice spoke from behind me. "Yeah," I said quietly, still walking in the direction of my in-laws. "Are you all right?" Eidolon asked. "No. I need to make sure my daughter's safe," I said before turning to her. "Can you get me to her quickly, please? Can you do your thing and take me to her, please?" I begged her before telling her where I wanted her to leave me. "Shit," Eidolon spoke. "That's around where that Lyman guy went. You don't think he—" she began, but I didn't give her time to finish before turning around to return to the handyman's office. "Wait, you can't go in there like that. You're bleeding like a sieve, man. Here, let me help you." She attempted to come to my aid. "No, I have to help her," I said, continuing to walk slowly toward the tower ahead, clutching my bleeding side. I began to feel a bit dizzy as I walked down the empty street. I felt tired, but I had to keep going. But I didn't make it very far down the road at all before everything went black, and I crashed to the ground.
Well, if there's one thing for certain, it's that a hero's luck is usually no luck at all. That is, until the bitter end. And of course, that's only provided that evil does not prevail. But if you're looking for more terror to thwart through indulgence, then make sure to stop by again next weekend. And until then, make sure to like, share, subscribe, and turn on notifications so I can catch you all again next Saturday.